Ta-da!
Hello friends, Matthew here from Grey Army Gaming in drab and dreary Lund, Sweden. For today's episode of Musings of a Philogamer, we will be looking at the topic of This is the Way the World Ends, Kierkegaard and the Crisis of the Present Age. Now, I originally got interested in this topic because I was cruising around on various news sites as well as wargaming sites and reading some of the comments to the videos and comments to the articles. And I realized that there was some interesting ways that people were reacting to this media content, ways that were not so, how should we say, polite or civil. Of course, there will always be trolls in our society, but there's also, it seems, a culture that accepts or in fact expects that there will be a certain amount of uncivility in the way that we deal with one another in the public sphere. And this really got me thinking a lot about not just these specific websites, but about the larger political climate in general in Europe, in America, and the, in general speaking, Western civilization. Now, I am trained as a Kierkegaard researcher, so of course I wanted to turn to Kierkegaard as my primary resource as I take up this question: what is it that is underlying the specific culture of uncivility that we have? And is it indicative of a certain crisis? Well, if you are interested in following along with this essay as we go through it here, you can read it or you can download it later on from our website. Please do visit greyarmygaming.com. There you can click on the download tab and that will bring you then to another page where you can download Musings of a Philogamer essays and you'll have that ready for you in a free PDF. In his famous poem, The Hollow Men, T.S. Eliot concludes with what are perhaps four of the most memorable lines in all of literature. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Over the past year or so, I have come across an increasing number of commentators writing on what they see as the impending collapse of Western civilization. Whether or not such commentators are correct in their assessments is unclear. What is clear, however, is that this narrative of decline extends from a genuine sense of uneasiness, an uneasiness that is, I would suggest, indicative of a certain form of crisis in our culture. The aim I have in mind for this talk is twofold. First, to characterize and to explore this crisis of our age, and second, to begin to sketch out in rough form something of a response to it. In doing so, I will be drawing on the thought of the Danish philosopher and social critic Søren Kierkegaard. Not only is Kierkegaard a brilliant observer of the human condition, but he also possesses an incredible insight into the trajectory of Western culture running from his age up to and through our own. As such, his thought provides a solid foundation for our investigation. Let us begin by focusing on several reflections Kierkegaard develops in his 1846 work, Two Ages. At the heart of this text is the contrast Kierkegaard draws between what he identifies as the age of revolution and the present age. We may touch upon each of these in turn. The age of revolution. As Kierkegaard remarks time and again, the age of revolution is fundamentally characterized by passion. But what does Kierkegaard mean by passion? Passion, in his view, is what pushes individuals to make existential commitments and to take risks in a world of uncertainty. It is through passion that one begins the quest for truth and is ultimately able to receive truth. And it is passion that allows one to develop character. In short, passion is the central driving force for the thriving human existence. As Kierkegaard writes in concluding Unscientific Postscript, for the existing person, passion is existence at its very highest. It is important to note here, however, that for Kierkegaard, passion in the age of revolution is essentially teleological. That is, it is always passion directed towards something. In two ages, Kierkegaard is clear that this something is an ideal, and we could even venture to say the ideal of the good. As such, the picture we have now arrived at is that of passion in pursuit of ideality. For Kierkegaard, the social implications of this account are massive. In the age of revolution, individuals find unity with one another precisely in their common struggle for the ideal. In this sense, they distance themselves from conflicts with one another in order to fight together for the good. As Kierkegaard writes, when individuals are essentially and passionately related to an idea and together are essentially related to the same idea, the relation is optimal. Here, there is a decent modesty between person and person that prevents crude aggressiveness. To employ a musical metaphor, such social relations, Kierkegaard notes, are akin to the harmoniousness of full orchestrated music. Ultimately, it is precisely this dynamic that provides an age with its vitality and its power. The present age. In contrast to the age of revolution, Kierkegaard notes that his present age is one in which the ideal has been abandoned. No longer are his contemporaries concerned with the good. Instead, they are occupied with cheap entertainment, shallow social honors, and merely becoming a number in the crowd. With the loss of the ideal also comes the loss of passion, or rather, sustained passion that leads to character has been traded for a fleeting enthusiasm and ultimately leads to nothing. As Kierkegaard writes, the present age is devoid of passion, flaring up in superficial, short-lived enthusiasm and prudentially relaxing indolence. To put it in another way, for Kierkegaard, the present age is characterized by a great deal of noise without any substance. In such a situation, there is no risk, no commitment, and no development of character. Everything becomes spectacle and superficiality. To illustrate this latter point, Kierkegaard tells a story about a treasure out on a dangerously thin piece of ice. In the age of revolution, an individual steps forward and risks her life in order to skate out to the treasure. And in this process, her peers support her through it all. In the present age, in contrast, an individual gives the illusion of courage as he heads out for the treasure. He skates right up to the point where the ice is dangerous, but then he turns back at the last moment without actually taking any risk. For this venture, he is honored in a great banquet. All the while, the guests fully understand both that everything was merely a spectacle and that the skater is really no one special. Certainly, no one more special than they are. With this story, we begin to see the enormous social implications of the account described above. Without essential passion, writes Kierkegaard, everything becomes meaningless externality, devoid of character, and life together becomes stagnant water. Moreover, when there no longer exists an ideal for which to fight, individuals instead turn inward in conflict with one another. As Kierkegaard puts it, people shove and press and rub against each other in pointless externality, turning to each other in a frustrating and suspicious aggressive leveling. In short, social relations in the present age that is devoid of passion and ideality are little more than turmoil and commotion that end in nothing. Such a dynamic ultimately leaves the age utterly enervated and hollow. Armed with Kierkegaard's description of these two ages, we may now turn to our own context with a simple question: how are we to understand this present age? Although there are several ways in which our age departs from Kierkegaard's, I would nevertheless suggest that with respect to the issues we have touched upon above, we have good reason to see the former not only as a continuation, but also a more extreme version of the latter. Consider 2 points in support of this claim. First, our present age is certainly one that is struggling with the loss of ideals. As numerous commentators such as David Brooks from the New York Times have recently pointed out, within our post-Trump Western world, we are more and more losing our faith in democracy. Our belief in unity is increasingly being drowned out by the cacophony of conflicting and relativized viewpoints. We are, to a greater and greater extent, giving up truth for whatever ideology is loudest or most powerful. We are progressively losing the sense of what it means to be citizens within a thriving culture who join together in pursuit of the good. And, through such loss, we have become cynical and hardened. Although we may nevertheless still profess certain ideals such as poverty reduction or a belief in universal human rights, without really committing to these ideals, pursuing them, and allowing them to radically transform our existential forms of life, such ideals prove to be nothing more than abstractions. And such abstractions, unfortunately, do not have the power to pull us out of the clutches of crisis. Second, given the loss of ideality, our age is, like Kierkegaard's, one that lacks an essential passion. Instead of passion, we have become content with flashes of enthusiasm that blow up quickly, but are just as quickly gone and forgotten. We jump misguided from spectacle to spectacle, like a man ruled by his desires. One day we were all about health and exercise. The next day we cut loose and party. The day after, we express our disgust with harassment by joining #MeToo. The following day, we rave about Rihanna's latest music video and give a thumbs up to objectification. Perhaps we sign a mailing list for Amnesty International the next day, and 24 hours later, we drop half of our salary on clothes from H&M. And to round off the week, we post about the horrors of poverty on our Facebook account while walking past the beggar sitting outside our local grocery store. All of this enthusiasm indeed leads to noise, commotion, and spectacle. But out of it comes no risk, no commitment, and no character. And just as with Kierkegaard's present age, the loss of ideality and passion in our age carries negative social consequences. Moreover, it is precisely here that the crisis of our present age perhaps comes into clearest view. Without an outward-looking goal to unify us, we too turn inward with destructive infighting, where we tear apart one another in the public sphere. For unequivocal evidence of this, we need look no further than the archive comprising our collective digital lives. An archive with its trivial Trump tweets, fiery Facebook fights, and crass critical comments. In short, we have become something of a culture of trolls in an all-out war of all against all. But need we end the story here? Are we doomed to accept this doomsday assessment? And does the crisis facing our present age inevitably entail the collapse of Western civilization? In a word, no. Although Kierkegaard is correct that the age of revolution is past and thereby cannot be resurrected, I would nevertheless argue that we are able to reclaim something of the spirit of the age of revolution by undertaking a new task. That is, the task of pursuing new ideals. In order to begin to bring this talk to a close, I would like to gesture towards one such ideal, namely what I identify as radical civility. We should be careful at the outset not to let the term civility lead us astray. Whereas civility is defined as formal politeness and courtesy in behavior and speech, radical civility goes far beyond mere social nicety. More specifically, what makes it different is that it is based upon the radical risk of appealing to the humanity of all people, regardless of who such people are, where they come from, which political or social ideology they subscribe to, etc., as well as the radical commitment to respect such people, to care for them, and to love them precisely because they are human. Such is the ideal pursued by some of the greatest heroes in history, including Socrates, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr. Radical civility thus proves a powerful force for counteracting the internally destructive tendencies of our present age, precisely in that it creates a space where the other can be met and engaged in a constructive and edifying manner. It is for this reason that gesturing towards the ideal of radical civility is appropriate for a talk that is posted on the Grey Army Gaming YouTube channel. If anything, the goal of philosophy should be precisely what we have been outlining here, a critical opposition to the nihilistic tendencies within our present age, with the aim of helping all people to flourish. Indeed, participation with this presentation, although certainly not an end in itself, is nevertheless still a good first step in nurturing the ideal of radical civility. There is, however, much more that still needs to be done. But this will be the task for another time. To conclude, let us return once again to the last few lines of Eliot's poem. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Indeed, the crisis of our present age entails that the world ends in the whimper of a culture that has lost its passion and its ideals. But as we have shown above, such an end is by no means inevitable. As such, I leave you with a final question. Will we be people who merely sit by and become swept up in the nihilistic currents swirling around us? Or will we be people who face the crisis of our present age head on by passionately pursuing the ideal of radical civility? The choice is yours, mine, and ours, together. Well, thank you for joining us here today at Grey Army Gaming, where Grey can always play.